Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about adjusting for missed shots. Okay, now this isn't like if you're at the range trying to dial in. This is like shooting for when it counts. Okay, whether it's whatever, a hunting type of situation, or long distance shooting for sport, or World War III broke out or whatever. And you're shooting at some distance, okay, and your shot misses, right? And there's lots of reasons why your shot might miss. Your zero might be off. Maybe your scope got bumped. Okay, it's not likely to move your zero, especially if it's a good quality scope, but that could happen. More likely scenario might be because ammunition change, right? You zeroed in with one kind of ammunition, and now you ran out, or for whatever reason you had to switch to some other type of ammunition, and it's behaving slightly different, at 300, 400, 500 yards. Okay, it's probably not going to be that far off at 50 yards, but at 400 yards, 500 yards, just changing the ammunition might make a difference. The most likely thing, even with your own ammunition, is the wind. Okay, if you're shooting at 400 or 500 yards, the wind can really mess with you. Now you might calculate that it's a 5-mile-per-hour wind, and in fact it's a 7.5, or that you might think it's a 10, and in fact it's a 5. So you might guess the wind wrong. So we can make really quick, fast corrections if we happen to see where the bullet lands. Okay, so what's required here, okay, is, first of all, we got to have that consistent trigger pull. Okay, and those of you guys that have been shooting for a while, when you squeeze your trigger, if you jerk the trigger or not. All right, so the first thing you got to do is be honest with yourself. Did you have a consistent trigger pull? And usually I can tell, aside from just feeling the trigger, I can tell with the reticle. So for example, here, grab this thing over here. Let's say this is my target, right? And this is my aiming point, my reticle. And I put this on the target. What I want to see is when I squeeze the trigger, it goes boom, 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 and lands back. If it goes boom or boom or boom, that's an indication that I jerked the trigger. So when you squeeze the trigger and your reticle goes boom and lands back on it, that's a good indication that you had a good trigger squeeze, and that's also one of the reasons you want to basically look in your scope and see what that reticle does. The reticle is going to give you a lot of information. It's going to tell you, for example, if you had a good trigger squeeze. And that's one of the nice things about shooting 5.56 is that when that gun goes bang, the gun doesn't jump too much. You can stay on your target. And you can observe what your reticle actually does when you're shooting some of the more powerful calibers. Unless you got a muzzle brake on it, the gun might move too much and you might lose track of that reticle. Okay, so if we are able to see what the reticle is doing, that's going to give us important information with regards to our trigger squeeze. Was it a good trigger squeeze? Okay, but then if we're able to continue if we're able to do this, right, and keep looking through the scope, there's a chance, right, depending on what we're shooting at, what the background is like, there's a chance that we might see where the bullet lands, where the bullet hits. Okay, it might be because of a dust cloud, or whatever. You're not always going to see it, but there's a chance that you might see where the bullet goes. Now, one of the things is, if you're shooting at good distance, one of the things I have observed is, especially if the sun's behind you, right, and you're shooting at good distance, and you keep looking through that scope, there's times when I can actually see the bullet going down range in the scope. And as weird as that sounds, let's say, use this as an exaggeration. Let's say this is the back of the bullet, right? Obviously, this would be a very big bullet, but if this is going down range, even though it's going really fast that way, okay, so let's say the bullet's going that way. It's going really fast that way, but the up, down, or side to side motion is not much. Okay, so if you're observing this from the back, all right, a spotter can definitely see the back of the bullet because he's got usually has a better scope, a bigger lens. That's one of the things that a good spotter is looking for. A good spotter is actually tracking your bullet all the way to the target, and he can give the shooter information like that. But even if you're shooting yourself at long enough distance with the right lighting, you can kind of see the back of your bullet get all the way to the target. Or you can see the impacts, right? Because let's say the lighting conditions aren't right. You can, sometimes you might be able to see the impacts, especially if it's like a sandy, dusty, type of area, and you might see where they hit. So if we see where the bullet hits, we can make a really, really fast adjustment, okay? So rather than, the last thing we want to do when it really counts is start trying to mess with the dials, right? The assumption is that we have to go on the assumption that our rifle has held zero, and it's some other factor that's affecting the bullet, most likely wind, but maybe different ammunition or whatever. So I've got two different reticles here, right? This side over here is the Griffin grid. This side over here is the Raptor. So let's say I'm shooting at 400 yards, right? So with the Griffin grid, basically it looks like, first of all, let me show you on a piece of paper what it looks like, and then I'll show you this blow up, okay? So two different reticles we're looking at. So this is the Griffin grid. That's what I have in my primary arms. That's in the primary arms. SLX 1 to 10 by 28. Each of those dots is exactly 1 mil apart, okay? So this doesn't give you win holes or anything like that. They're just one mil apart, and you use that for measuring, okay? Now you can also use this for win holes, right? Because basically, you can memorize certain numbers, like let's say with a 5.56, I think, let's say at 500 at I think with a 10-mile-per-hour wind at 400 yards, it would be a one. If it's a crosswind, it would be a 1 mil hold, and then at 500 yards with a 10-mile-per-hour wind, it would be a 2 mil hold. Okay, so you can figure out which. You can make wind adjustments with this, but basically these are symmetrical dots. Okay, so we're gonna look on this side over here. All those dots are symmetrical. They're basically equally spaced 1 mil apart. Now on this side over here, I've got the M8 Raptor, which looks like this. Okay. All right, so that's your M8 Raptor. So these dots over here, they're not perfectly spaced apart. These dots here are, the first dot's your 5 mile. Let's say if we go down to let's go to a 600 yard line, because they're a little further apart, you'll see. So the first dot's 5 miles per hour. Next one is 10, 15, and 20, okay? So those are wind holes, right? So if you come down here, let's say to the 800 yard line, you'll see that you still got 4 dots, but the space between them is a little further apart. So again, you got 5, 10, 15, 20 mile per hour wind holes. This is calibrated for 5.56 308. Now, interestingly enough, on this line over here, on the 800 yard line, the distance between these dots is about 1 mil apart. Okay, so if we needed to do some milling, we can use this 800 yard line, right? That's a quick way I found to basically, obviously with this particular reticle, I've got mill lines out here in the scope, but if you have one of those Raptor scopes that doesn't have mill lines built into it, it turns out the 800 yard line, those dots are about 1 mil apart. Okay, so you can use the Raptor that way for range estimating. Okay, so let me put the paper down. I'm going to kind of give you guys a blow up over here. All right, so this is the Griffin grid, right? So even though my artwork here is kind of shitty, each of these dots is exactly 1 mil apart. So basically with, like if I was with 5.56, 77 grain, I would zero in at 50 yards on that chevron, okay? So now this is not the scale, but the top of the spine over here, that's my 300 yard hold. Then the first line over here is 400, 500, and then 600, okay? That's how it works out. Now again, these are 1 mil apart. But that's just how it happens to work out with 5.56. Okay. Now you'll notice that the shoulders over here, they're at different sizes, so you can also use this for auto ranging. So at 400 yards, you match it up with the shoulders. At like 400 yards, so you just match it up with the shoulders really quickly to figure out what distance you're at, and then you know which line you're at. Okay. But let's say you factor that you've got, let's say you're shooting at 500 yards, which is this. And you've got a 10-mile-per-hour wind, right? So that means you would hold on this dot over here, right? So you're holding on this dot right there. Okay? So now you pull your trigger. You're looking through your scope, all right? When the scope recoils, you're holding on this dot. You see that this dot here basically stays on your target, right? So it comes up, boom, and then falls down in the same spot. But then as you continue looking through the scope, you see that your bullet landed over here where this dot is, right? So you guessed 10 miles per hour, but the wind's actually 5 miles per hour, or apparently it doesn't matter at that point because you know what to adjust. If you were aiming on this dot and you saw your bullet land over here on this dot, then what you do is you just shift this dot over to your target, and now that's your new aiming point. Okay, so that is a really quick way using these complex reticles to adjust for misses, right? Regardless of what the reason is. You changed ammunition, the wind isn't what you thought it is, whatever. As long as your trigger pull is consistent, and when you pull that trigger, you saw that your aiming point, right, whatever it is, didn't didn't jump to the side of the target. If you see where that bullet lands, that's your new aiming point. Okay, now if you are working with a spotter, okay, your spotter basically should also be looking at it, because ideally your spotter would have a scope that has similar markings in it, and basically if he sees you, if you're aiming over here and he can see that the bullet lands there, he would tell you to adjust 1 mil to the left, and then immediately you gotta that's your new aiming point. Okay. Now another way that this works great, if you have two guys, basically two marksmen with the same identical reticle. Okay, so let's say they calculate that, let's say it's a 10-mile-per-hour wind. They're both looking at the scope, they're both looking through the scope using the same dot, right? They both calculate, okay, we're at 500 yards, where wind is 10 mile per hour crosswind, we're holding on this dot over here. So the first shooter takes his shot while the second shooter is observing to see where the bullet lands. Okay, so they both got the same dot on the target. First shooter takes his shot, second shooter is observing, and he notices that the bullet lands on this. Then he moves that dot over to the target, he pulls the trigger, he gets the hit. So the way it looks is like you got two shots, a miss and a hit. Okay, but they came from two different guns, right? Because the second gun has the same scope, with the same reticle, and they're looking to see where the bullet hits so they can make a quick adjustment. Okay, so that's with your Griffin grid here. With the Raptor, it would work the same way, because basically here you've got these dots are not 1 mil apart. These are now wind holds. Okay, so with let's say, so this is my 400-yard line. So my 5 miles per hour is on the shoulders here. Then that's my 10, 15, 20. Okay. And then when you get further out, that's my 5, 10, 15, 20. Now, if you notice that they kind of go out. So the way it sort of works out is like the dot below is like kind of in between. So the point is you can use this exactly the same way, regardless what line you're on, right? Because here these are mils, these are winds. So here, same deal here. Let's say we're at 400 yards. Same deal. We think that 500 yards. Let's stick with the same number. We're 500 yards. We think that it's a 10-mile-per-hour wind. Or let's say it's a 5 mile per hour, right? We think it's a 5 mile per hour wind, and we're using that first dot right there. Okay. No, actually, the 5 on this one, that 5 mile per hour would actually be the shoulder over here. So we're using the shoulder here for that 5 mile per hour wind. All right, and then we pull the trigger, and it turns out that the bullet lands close to this dot here. Well, now that dot moves over to this spot, and that dot is now our new aiming point. Okay, so that's a really quick, fast way to adjust for misses, right? Without having to worry about dialing turrets and anything like that. That's why you want a caliber. Ideally, you want a caliber, or you want the gun set up in such a way, be it with a muzzle brake or whatever, that you can continue to look through your scope and keep the reticle on target, and ideally observe where the bullet impacts, so that you can you can make your follow-up shot. Okay, and this is the reason also why I tell people that if you're gonna have a scope, an amount that comes out to about 1.5 pounds, right? If you're going to be carrying this amount of weight on the gun, okay, I want this type of a capability. Okay, if I'm not interested in this type of a capability, I'll just use a red dot with a magnifier behind it, okay, or a prism scope with a magnifier behind it, because the benefit of that is, like, at night, I can just rip off the, the magnifier, and now I have a much lighter rifle. I don't have to carry 1.5 pounds at night. Okay, so if you're going to be carrying about 1.5 pounds on your rifle, it's worth it to have a reticle that gives you all these capabilities. And maybe you're not at we're talking about like range estimating, auto sizing, all that kind of stuff. And maybe you're not at that point now, but you'll grow into it. Okay, so those are my thoughts on that. Like, instead of buying, let's say, like a $200 or $300 simple scope that has like a very simple reticle, I think it's worth it to pay a little bit more to have a complex reticle that you can grow into, that you can go take a class. That, because if you show up to a class with a very simple reticle, they're going to be like, okay, we really can't do much with this, because you can't do all the things that we're talking about. Now, this one over here, this is, right now, it's like $450 from Primary Arms. To give you guys a peek through it. This is the one with the Mifflin grid. Now, this is a second focal plane scope. Okay, see if I can get this to kind of focus. So this is a second focal plane scope. So that what that means is that you're going to see those. You're going to see that reticle in all magnifications. But the measurements are only true in eight in your max magnification. Actually, this is a 10. It's not an 8. So this is a 110. So you got to be in your max magnification for those mil dots to be accurate. See if I point it down, you guys can get a better picture. Yeah. Yeah, you can actually kind of see it in the shadow over there. I'm not gonna get the focus. We kind of got it there. Anyway, so that's the information I want to share with you guys today. I've had both of these scopes off the rifle for almost 2 weeks now, right? Because basically I took these, I got away from the gun range, took these out into the city, and basically I had put these on what would normally be realistic type of targets, on cars, on people, on bicycles moving, on boats, airplanes. Okay, and that's one of the things that you got to do with this type of a scope, right? Don't just, I mean, there's only so much stuff that you can do at the gun range with something like this. You want to get some experience using this on realistic type of targets. Now, obviously, you got to take it off the rifle, but there's a lot of things to be learned by taking this off the rifle and doing these type of observations, out there in the real world. I've done a whole video series on these two scopes, particularly this one over here, the Raptor. This is the M8 Raptor. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a link below to a playlist that I have set up specifically for this scope. Now, this is a $1,500 scope. See if I can get this thing to focus. Come on, give me focus. Turn off the sight, get off the board there. Now, this is a first focal plane scope, so you're gonna see one type of you're gonna see a different image in one magnification. Nope, let's try a different spot. See if I can get it to focus that way. Bring it a little bit. Yeah, I don't think this thing's going. Somebody has told me to try doing a manual focus, but I can't make it work on this camera. Let's try max magnification. If you can see the reticle. Oh, okay, that's a little better. So you see a different image when you are in your max magnification, which is 8 power on this scope. So yeah, I just want to give you an idea of what these reticles actually look like. But anyway, that's the deal with bring the camera back out, with adjusting for missed shots for whatever reason. You know, different ammunition, wind. Keep that aiming point on the target. Try to observe where your bullet landed. Okay, and then wherever it landed, that's your new aiming point, right? So if I take a shot there, let's say I'm just completely off. This Griffin grid gives you lots of dots here. So let's say I'm holding over there and all of a sudden like I end up with a hit over here. Well, now I just shift this to my, I shift the scope up, put this dot on my target, pull the trigger, and I should get a hit if my trigger pull is consistent. Okay. So in the comments and in the description below, I'm going to put a playlist with a lot of videos that I have done with working with these complex reticles that I think you guys will, you'll get a lot of useful information out of. So thanks for watching. I'll talk to you all soon.